Today's video is APUSH Unit 1 from the years 1491 to 1607. So let's get right into it. The first topic here is pre-Columbian native societies. So it's important to note that before the arrival of Europeans, these Native Americans were extremely diverse and developed based on their geography. So if we move down to Central America, we can see the Aztecs, and they were located in modern-day Mexico, and they can be marked by Tenochtitlan, which was their capital city, their largest city, and it shows that these Native Americans built large, complex civilizations. Chinampas, where they're floating gardens where they would grow food on top of the lake, and they would also have rituals showing that these native societies would develop religious authority over their societies. The Incas were in the mountains of Peru and South America, and so because of their climate and because of their geography, they developed terrace farming in order to be able to farm these materials and these crops to help advance their society. They would develop infrastructure like roads in order to get around the mountains, and the Mita system allowed them to mine minerals in order to grow their wealth even more. In the American Southwest, we have the Pueblo tribe, who, as you can see in the bottom right, would sometimes create these cliff dwellings where they would be safe from floods and other natural disasters. They would also use the cultivation of maize, as you can see in the bottom left, and this helped grow their population. In the Northwest is the Chumash and the Chinook, and what's important to note about these people is that they would fish and they would live in longhouses in these permanent civilizations. So you could see how these native tribes are becoming especially accustomed to their environment. In the Great Basin and the Great Plains, we have the Ute tribe, who would hunt bison and would travel around in groups to hunt and live in their societies. In the Mississippi Valley, we have Cahokia, which was a large civilization outside of modern-day St. Louis, in which mound builders would build these large mounds. And in the society, there were suspected to be over 30,000 people living here. So we can see how more complex societies are developing. And in the Northeast, we have the Iroquois Confederacy, which was a large group of Native Americans that would hunt and fish and farm, and they would also live in longhouses just like the people of the Northwest. So as we move past the pre-Columbian era, we're going to have reasons for Europeans wanting to explore outside of Europe. One of these reasons is that European governments started to centralize. And really what this means is that instead of being disconnected small little kingdoms, they became larger kingdoms like modern France or Spain or England or something like that. They desired luxury goods, so obviously people want the nicer things, so they wanted to be able to go out and acquire materials in order to make these nice things. A big reason, though, is that after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the Ottomans controlled the trade routes eastward going toward China. So this is important because the Ottomans were Muslim, and they didn't want the Christian Europeans being able to access the trade routes. So the Europeans had to look toward alternate ways to get to China. They also desired to spread Christianity because they feared the Muslims would overrun them. So they looked to spread Christianity to people outside of Europe. And you can remember the reasons for exploration with this mnemonic device right here: God, gold, and glory. So what this means is that the God part means that Europeans look to spread their religion of Christianity. The gold part means that they look to find economic wealth through minerals like gold and silver. And the glory part means that certain European explorers wanted to create glory for themselves by sailing and discovering new lands. Spain and Portugal are going to be the main two empires we talk about in this period. So Portugal, they actually, instead of going west, decided to sail south around Africa in order to get toward China. And this allowed Spain to sail west through the uncharted waters of the Atlantic Ocean. So Christopher Columbus He is chartered by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to sail west in 1492, and he discovers the Americas. The Columbian Exchange is a very important part of this unit. You could possibly see it on an LEQ or maybe a short answer. So basically, the Columbian Exchange was just transferring items like animals, disease, food, and people between the New World and the Old World and vice versa. So if we're talking about going from the Old World to the New World, basically meaning we're going from Europe and Africa to the Americas, the most important thing is that diseases like smallpox, influenza, and measles spread to the native population. And this impacted the natives so much that millions of them died in an event called the Great Dying. And this significantly impacted the demographics of the Americas. Food like sugar, rice, wheat, soybeans, chicken, and pigs came from Europe. And especially sugar is important because this allowed for sugar colonies in the Caribbean and South America to be able to grow and develop. And then finally, African slaves were brought over from Africa to the Americas in order to work on these cash crop plantations. Going from the New World to the Old World, we have food like maize, tomatoes, tobacco, and turkey. And we have minerals like gold and silver going to the Old World as well. Forced labor in the Americas. As the Spanish decided to continue colonizing the New World, they needed a system of labor. So they first turned to the Native Americans. Under the encomienda system, the Spanish government granted Spanish men land and the rights of Native American laborers who lived on that land. So what the Spanish men would do is that they would force the natives to work on their farms and do other mining systems and things like that. But the problem is that the Native Americans had no immunity to European diseases, so they all began to die in the Great Dying. They would also run away sometimes to what's called maroon communities. So after the whole Native American experiment failed, the Spanish decided to turn to African enslavement. So the Africans had immunity to European diseases, and they didn't know the land as well, so they couldn't run away. So this is why the Spanish decided to go with African labor. The Africans had to go through the Middle Passage, which was a sad and horrible event in which hundreds of thousands of Africans died along the way. The Spanish attempted to integrate Native Americans into the Spanish society in the Americas. So they implemented a system called the Casta system, which was a racial hierarchy in which Spanish men that were born in Spain were at the very top, and they were called peninsulares, and it worked all the way down racially until you got to the natives and African slaves. So Spain also used the mission system to convert natives to Christianity. So Spain, as we know, was trying to spread the word of Christianity and spread the religion. So they would force Native Americans to convert. However, in 1680, the Pueblo Revolt in modern New Mexico overthrew Spanish rule. And this displays how Native Americans were fighting back against colonial authority. Bartolomé de las Casas is an important man to know in Unit 1. He argued that Native Americans were being treated extremely poorly in the Americas and that they should have more rights, but he also preferred that African labor was used instead. The main economic policy that's used by all the Europeans going from Unit 1 all the way until Unit 3 is going to be known as mercantilism. And basically, this system is based on the principle that there's only a limited amount of wealth. So as we can see on the bottom, we have a pie, right? And there's only a certain amount of pie. So all the Europeans want a chunk of that pie. And so they also believe that all the wealth is tied up in gold and silver and that you should export a lot more than you import. So this will keep a lot more of the wealth inside of your own country. So we can use this policy to explain why the Spanish went after gold and silver in the Americas and why other European powers wanted to colonize the Americas, going into Unit 2 and even a little bit into Unit 3. So that is the end of Unit 1 review. I'm your host, Jake, and thank you for listening to Jake Teaches History.